Welcome to Fun is Fundamental. Fun is Fundamental is a podcast for those who realize that the enjoyment of life is about having something deep in our souls which lights our fire. It's for those who maybe have lost that fire and feel like they are missing out on the pleasures of life. In each episode, I will share recent fun activities and focus on why having fun is essential for good health. I'm your host, Alenia, and I invite you to take this journey with me and join the pleasure-seeking movement. Good morning, Joshua. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good, yeah.
It's good to
Daylight
hear.
savings just started, so I'm always this is always a hard week for me is the time change. But other than that, it's a nice day. It's yeah, spring's coming. I'm happy.
Exactly. There are things to look forward to. So I'm so glad that you're concentrating on those because I think that's what we need more of these days, right?
Definitely. I 100% agree. Yeah, there's a lot of negativity obviously in the world, so anything to boost your spirits is a good thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm with you.
I guess would you like to tell the audience a little bit about what you do?
Sure. Okay. We can spend a lot of time on this, so I try to be as terse as possible. I am an industrial organizational psychologist, or IO psych, as they call it sometimes, because we just like to shorten things as much as possible, especially here in the United States. That's why you can just call me Josh or Joshua. It doesn't really matter. But anyway, so I've always been interested in human behavior ever since I was a little child. I would try to emulate Bible stories. I was brought up in a highly religious household. We could talk more about that if you'd like. And I just was not only interested in humanity and human stories, but also how to embrace humanity and find ways to help people become better. So that's been a through line throughout my life, and IO psychology is no different. It really helps people in the workplace, although, as you might imagine, it's also very beneficial for out of the workplace because human beings are human beings in and out of the workplace, unless you're watching an Apple show like Severance.
Yes. Have you watched season two?
Oh, I've started and I think it's wonderful. I prefer season one so far.
Mm.
That was really like that hooked me so much. And then I rewatched season one before diving into season two because as you know, it's been quite some time between the two seasons.
Mhm.
And yeah, the more I watch season two, although I like it a lot, I think it's great. Season one just really has resonated with me and for so many different reasons. And yeah, I think the corporatization, if you will, of humanity and what has done, the distillation of like if you just look at the color schemes and how everything is kind of just stripped away, that alone, although there are many, many other themes to the story, that by itself, I think is so profound because stripping away your individuality in order to be a cog in a machine is just another one of those very interesting sort of like human behavior things that we do for something that was actually made up, if you think about it. Money. It-
Mhm.
It's like we just made it up, and here we are working 40 plus hours a week devoted to something that isn't really there. It's not real. I mean, it is, it's physically there, but it's not like blood that runs through our veins, you know,
Mhm.
which is so vital to us. This is just some sort of um theoretical thing that was decided to be used to barter
Yeah.
and for so many other reasons. Anyway, I mean, I'm not an economist, so I don't want to pretend like I know all the ins and outs of it. But my current job is about financial education at a nonprofit, and so I've had to kind of learn and grow, and I've had a huge learning curve with a lot of those aspects. And I just came from the Philadelphia Federal Reserve, where I learned so many different things about what they do. So anyway, not to go off too much into a tangent, but yeah, this all comes from Severance, and I see elements of those themes, or have seen as well in my lifetime, and how it connects to IO psychology.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, I mean, for someone like you who does work in, psychology in a corporate environments as an IO, I'm sure like your interpretation and how you see like the show Severance is probably you have like a lot more insight into like like into things than just someone like me who actually I've like pretty much never worked in like a corporate environment, so like for me it's just like it's like I know about it but it's also kind of foreign to me, like it's kind
Oh,
of just like wow, this is soul crushing like
yeah.
like that kind of thing.
I
But
think it definitely feels that way, and it's part of the reason why I decided to embark in the nonprofit industry and have my trajectory purposefully in that because it doesn't solve for everything. There are plenty of nonprofits that run just like for-profit entities. So it really just depends on the leadership, the type of nonprofit it is, as well as what their products or services are offering. So there's a lot of different variables that go into operating any business. But for the most part, I tend to believe that being at a nonprofit puts you at an advantage in terms of getting away from the corporatization, tying to obviously a bottom line where you're churning out profit year over year, and anything less than that requires like extra scrutiny and I think that's where you start to lose a little bit of your soul, if you will, because again, you're working towards something that was made up. I mean, it's not going to go away. So I keep saying it's made up, but the solution is not to destroy money as we know it. Although I could be totally wrong. I mean,
yeah.
lots of things are being destroyed as we know it.
Yes.
Um, but in my mind, it's not for the better. So we would need something in replacement. And so, I just don't know what that would be at this point in time. So I relent myself to the machine, if you will, because I have a house. I want to go to the grocery and be able to afford food, although it's getting harder and harder as things progress. Um, but yeah, I mean, this is why I've dedicated my life to the mission and vision of nonprofit organizations.
Mhm. How long have you been working with nonprofits?
So it's been over 13 years now
Okay.
at various different types of nonprofits. So it hasn't always been in the financial services sector. It's been varied. But what I really like about that is it's given me the perspective of many different types of nonprofit entities, going into different types of services and different types of funding models. The one that I'm at right now actually works off of a self-funded um, endowment, which is way different than a nonprofit entity that actually has to go out and find funds, whether it be from grants or uh, philanthropy, people giving money or giving their time, if you will, because that costs money as well.
Mhm.
There's an opportunity cost to that. So uh, being able to just concentrate on the work at hand and not having to bring in funds through business development, I think is such a blessing. Um, but I also kind of miss a little bit the excitement of getting a grant, although now that's also a big question,
Oh, yeah, no.
you know, how grants are going to work moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, I appreciate both.
Yeah. I know friends who grants have been cut and yeah, it's kind of like so many people are in like these tailspins right now of like what are we going to do? So yeah, no, crazy times we're living in.
Right. Well, going back, one last thing about Severance, unless you want to talk more about it, would be the storytelling aspect. So, as I mentioned, ever since I was a young child, I was gravitating towards stories. I thought this was something that was so profound to me, especially the stories that have had some sort of lesson. My point being that I think the best stories that are told in the world are the ones that bring you in because of the story itself. So a lot of people are watching Severance these days because it's just a great story, right? It just brings you in and immerses you in this world. And for people who just want to be entertained and not have to think about all the other layers that exist, that's fine. They can still sit and enjoy it and not have to like analyze or pick things apart or wonder like what the themes or analogies might be. They can just be like, I just like it. But for the people who want more than that, that's also there for them as well. And that's what I love about art, because you could take it for face value and just say, I just want some escapism. I just want to get away from the world. I just want to sit here for an hour or two, whatever it is. But for other people like myself, I need more. I just don't want to be entertained. I don't like things that are pretty gratuitous. That's just my personal taste. Um, but I really gravitate towards these stories where you walk away and you think more about your life. You think more about the decisions that you've made. And psychology has been a really big part of that, specifically communication psychology and strategies that look into how we can entertain people while simultaneously also educating them. And it could go both ways. You could be educated in things that are misnomers or mis or disinformation. You can also be educated as to what is the truth based on research. And that's where I fall into line. Like, I hope that's obvious, but I want to embed myself in things that help people to become better. And that could be a lot of fun too, to the point of your podcast. It's like I think a lot of times when I was young, all of this was so much fun, like creating things. And as we get older, I don't have to tell you, we know it gets harder and harder to tap into that childlike side of us that was having such an awesome time just creating something. And then we think of ourselves, not everyone, but I would venture to say a lot of people start to think of themselves as not really creative,
Mhm.
when in fact, every single one of us as a child was super creative in so many different ways. And so I think a big part of our lives as adults is to try to look through all the layers that we've built up over time, whether it be because of our own devices or externalities, and dig deep into that core of who we truly are so that we can have more fun in life.
Yeah. I think it's also an important conversation to have about like remembering that like creativity isn't just like drawing. It's not just making music. Like there's so many types of creativity and like so many people that are like, "Oh, I'm not creative. I don't have a creative bone in my body." And it's like, well, you're doing like what? You're an architect or like, you do this thing with your hands. You do like, there's all these different things where it's like you are creating something in so many ways. So many people are actually creating things, and you know, you go and like bounce ideas and have these like, oh, what about this? We could try this. It's like that's creation right there, you
Oh
know?
yeah, I love how you say this, and this is such an important fact for all of us to remember because we get so lost in our devices and we start to label what we do as non-creative when in fact we are making creative decisions, to your point, all the time. Every time we make a decision, that's creativity, whether we realize it or not. It's similar to when I was in grad school. I had to take a class on sales, and I was not looking forward to it at all. Same thing with math. They were kind of like in the same category. And then I thought back of all the kind of negative sales interactions that I've ever had. And I was like, that's not me. I don't want to, behave that way. And so not looking forward to this class. The very first chapter in the book that was assigned to us was really trying to change the understanding that we have about sales and the narrative that we tell ourselves. That first chapter, that first paragraph, if you will, was everyone is a salesperson, and here's why. Have you ever created a profile on a dating site? Have you ever uh, put a post up about something that you've done in your life? That's sales. Because you're selling something. You're selling the trip that you did. You're selling the wedding that you attended or that you were a part of yourself. You're selling yourself so that you could go on a date with somebody that is compatible with you. We're doing it all the time. And once you stop telling yourself that you're not a salesperson, you can tap into the power of sales in everything that you do, or as much as you want to. And the same thing goes for creativity. We tell ourselves a lot that we're just not creative people because I'm not creating a mural on the side of a wall. that looks like a realistic version of a cat. I love cats, so I'll just use that. At the same time, again, we are being creative every single time we make a decision, like I mentioned. And I think if you just let that settle in for a second, because that is so, so important, because every creative moment also has the opportunity to address something called VUCA, which came from the government and the military specifically. And VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. I would also add that when you are in a state of anxiety, the literature is very, very clear that creativity is the antidote to that. So just think about it. Like if your brain is caught in a loop of anxious thoughts where it's layer upon layer upon layer and it keeps getting worse, doing a creative feat, whether that be actual, like an artistic endeavor, which could be writing, um, whatever, the arts, the crafts, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that, again, to your point. Um, it takes the brain into a different direction, and it's not going to solve everything forever, but for that moment and those moments, there's something called flow, which I could get into, but a lot of creative people who tap into this create a sense of flow. And what flow really does, what it distills down to is mindfulness. You're living in the moment, and actors do this really well as well, additionally, but you're living in the moment, and that is the best antidote to all of these sort of issues that we find ourselves in that are detracting from and lessening our opportunities to engage in things like fun. And when I say fun, I'm talking more about not just going to a movie theater and seeing something that you thought was fun or going to Disney World as an example. Those things are fun, but there's different aspects of fun. You can have fun in the most rote sort of aspects of life. Like if you're a data analyst and you're just plugging numbers all day, there are creative ways to embed fun into your work. We could talk more about that. Um, but the difference could be between you just going to work, punching in, punching out, and feeling it like it's soulless versus inserting some sort of wonderful activity that adds to the your ability to engage in flow. Again, even in the most rote sort of situations, it can be done.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, quite frankly, I sometimes I like just doing something that just like you just get into a flow. I
Mhm.
actually find it fun to just get into flow sometimes, even if
Okay.
it's just like not even like something that's like that important. But like when flow is broken, that's when I feel like frustrated sometimes. It's like when you're just like you're doing something, da da da
Right.
da da, da, you're going with it, and then suddenly like, you know, and you're someone interrupts you and you're just like, oh, okay. Because it's like starting and stopping, I find to
Right.
be like a difficult thing, you know?
I'm
So,
with you. Yeah, that can be frustrating. I think uh, to your point, if somebody is, kind of inserting into your flow, there's not much you can do about that.
yeah.
But you might be able to do other things, like put your phone away or in another room, excuse me, so that when it goes off or you get that ding, you're not notified. Um, you could close the door, you could tell people that this is quiet time, all those things that are in your control, I would recommend. And then also be ready. Be ready for yourself to get out of flow. And if you're really trying to get in flow, you're not always going to go there. It's almost like seeking happiness. If you're trying to gain happiness, you usually get the opposite. You get frustrated because you're looking for something that comes from within, and that usually is a natural consequence of you doing something else. So the action itself, a lot of times, will build whatever that sort of semblance of outcome that you're looking for. For example, if you're petting, if you have a pet at home, and I always think that it's not my pet, the pet owns me, but showing some love to your cat, dog, or otherwise, will usually bring you some great feeling. But if you're going into trying to seek that out, it's different. It's like you just do the action. You don't really think about, I need to be happy now. It kind of happens the other way around. Although there's nothing wrong with having a goal and saying, I'm engaging in this because I want this. Just know that it may or may not happen every single time. And you have to be okay with that because you can't force that.
Yeah. Well, I think like just the act of like, you know, going into something as like as if you're this is the outcome that I want is like you're automatically kind of taking yourself out of it because you're
Right.
thinking about the end result of like what you are going to get out of it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so there are two main things happening here. There's the outcome and then there's the process itself. And whenever you can, always default. This is from the literature as well, and I practice it. Always default to the process because the outcome will come. Now, in your mind, you want to know what your outcome is. I think this is akin to running. Let's just say, and I don't run all the time, but I used to run a lot, and I can't wait to get back to it. We'll see how that happens. You want to run, let's just say 2 or 3 miles. And so that's your outcome, right? You want to know because you don't want to just go out there and just run aimlessly. You want to kind of map out what you're doing so that you have that in place. But if that's all you're thinking about while you're running, you're going to have a horrible run because you're not allowing yourself to live in the moment. You might also trip and fall if you're running outside. You need to be aware of what's happening right in front of you. You cannot be fixated solely on that goal because it's just it will trip you up in so many different ways. And so the best thing to do is to set it, then forget it as much as you possibly can. Because I say forget it, but you're still consciously aware. Yeah, but you push that to the back of your mind so that you can concentrate on the task at hand, which is the process itself. And by engaging in that, the time goes by so quickly.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Yeah. It feels good when you get to that. Yeah. You talked a little bit about like like other kinds of fun that aren't like the high energy event kind of fun
Mhm.
and like having that maybe in work. What
Yeah.
are some like the things that you help, you know, those that you work with and nonprofits to seek to build get that, I guess. Yeah.
Sure, sure. I love there's two main things I'll use. I'll use a concrete example for you that I love using as an example. A few years back, I was consulting with a company, and back to the point I had made before, there was a lot of data entry happening. It was at a clinic, and they took care of people who were falling out of care for pretty serious diseases like HIV and other serious STIs. So that had gotten to a point to where it had, because they were out of care, it had become a major issue in their life and in their health. So this place was a very important sort of like stopping point to re-enter or bring people back into care. And it wasn't the only sort of service that they offered, but that was probably the most life-saving thing that they did. And there was a lot of individuals who did nothing but data entry for about 8 hours a day. And as you might imagine, as we talked about before, when that's all you're doing is crunching numbers, it's very difficult. I call it, one of those sort of rote um, activities that take place. So what was happening at this nonprofit was there were a lot of mistakes being made. People were being inattentive. They had huge workloads where lots of files were on their desk, and they were just not engaged in the work. They were coming in and they were just kind of punching in numbers, lots of mistakes, and people were having to go back, usually the middle managers, and correct all these mistakes, or have the frontline workers, as they're considered to be, re-enter that work, which made them even more sort of disengaged because they're having to redo the work that they've already done. So I came in, and as I told you, storytelling is a big part of what I do and what I have done in my life. Storytelling is not the only intervention to create and have, but it's my go-to, which is why I'm biased with it and I tend to use it. So I talk to the individual frontline workers And I got together a list of the things that were really kind of bothering them. And I created themes on that. And what it distilled itself down to was they just felt like they were cogs in a machine and that they were coming in and having to do something. And that when they made a mistake, that they were punished, quote unquote punished, and that it just made them feel even worse. So we started to talk about each of these files as a story. And although that sounds very simplistic, it's really not. Because each and every person that engaged with a file could think about the story in a different way that resonated with them the best. But at the end of the day, all of these people were human beings, were they not? And the storyline that you could glean through all of their data are just like tidbits of information and facts that you could stream together as you're putting together, as you're entering in all of their data. And just that slight change, slight, maybe not so slight, was something that helped people to engage better in their data collection. Now, I can't say what I did was 100% and changed everything, but I think it was a portion of what started to lower over time the amount of mistakes that were made by frontline workers and the feedback I was getting because I was there for a few months was that it actually helped them to engage in the work and create a sense of flow. Although they weren't calling it flow, but from a scientific viewpoint, what flow really is when you lose all sense of time and space, and you don't even realize you're in flow until after the fact.
Mhm.
And so the power of storytelling is so important, um, especially when you're engaging in work that just seems to be so like rote, as I mentioned. The other thing that I like to utilize is something called PERMA, which comes from positive psychology, and was the the father of positive psychology is Dr. Seligman. And PERMA is part of well-being theory. What it stands for is positive emotion, engagement, positive relationships, meaning, and achievement. Sometimes we like to add a V at the very end of PERMA, so PERMA V would be for vitality. Now, why do I mention all these things? Part of having fun, if you will, and remember, fun not just being like you feel good in the moment, could all be tied to these aspects. So the P again is positive emotion. And what that is having something like chocolate or whatever you feel like petting a cat, as we had mentioned, that brings you this feel good emotion where there's chemicals going off in your brain. What happens with P though is we have to understand that there's a threshold that each and every one of us have with positive emotion. I love cookies. I love soft bake, by the way, in case you're ever going to send me any cookies. But I can't have more than three at a time. If I start on that fourth one, I'm going to start to have a reaction or diminishing returns, as they call it. And so I have to keep that in mind. If I'm petting the cat too long, the cat's probably going to turn around and swat me. Maybe not all cats, but a lot of them will. So it's like everything that feels good has a threshold, and being aware of that and understanding where your threshold is very important because what that means is there's a limit to how good something can be or feel.
Mhm.
And that's why there's other aspects of this fun, if you will. Engagement is really understanding the strengths that you have that are inherent to you and you alone. And there are many different types of assessments that are out there to actually help you understand what your strengths are.
Mhm.
One of those assessments is called the Values in Action assessment. It's free to take, and I really like it. And consistently, what I've found is one of my top values is appreciation of beauty and excellence, which really resonates with me. I love going to mountain towns and to beaches and just sitting there and soaking up what I see in front of me It creates a sense of flow and all these other things. But what you can do, you don't have to go visit a mountain town. You don't have to necessarily be at a beach, although those things are wonderful and they help to give you this sense of engagement. You could do this at home. You could do it at work. And the way you do it is by number one, again, understanding what your true values are. And then number two, figuring out ways to actualize those things in your surroundings by what you can control. So there are many, many different ways. I won't go into that one. So I could go on to the next one, which is R, which is healthy relationships, healthy and good relationships. We all know the difference. If you're in an unhealthy relationship, you can feel it, or you should be able to, especially if your brain is operating from a typical standpoint. Um, if it's not, then you should be seeing a therapist and maybe even looking into the possibilities of, if not therapy, a combination of therapy and medication so that you can get to a place where you understand when you are in a relationship that is healthy versus toxic. Those healthy relationships are extremely important. And as you could imagine, it could work in so many different levels. So you have friendships, you have relationships with your coworkers, with entities like God, or if you don't believe in God, with the universe. All of those things are relationships. The relationship you have with yourself is also extremely important. And so there are many, many different ways or layers of relationships that you need to look into. So these things are to be worked on for your entire life. You never actually reach a destination with any of them.
Mhm.
The M is meaning. And what that means is that you're living for more than yourself. And this creates a sense of fun because it's not just about you, although that's important too. And everything starts with you, again, those relationships. But the meaning makes sure that you are doing things that actually help to create an effect of betterment for society. Achievement is easy. It's the thing I like to talk about with achievement, the A is it doesn't have to be a big thing. You know, getting a master's degree is a huge achievement. Congratulations, but it doesn't have to be something that major. It could be an achievement to get out of bed some days. It can be an achievement just to clean your bathroom. And so those need to be just as important and calculated into your PERMA. And then the V is vitality. And this is probably the hardest thing during these times, but it's about eating right. It's about working out. It's about reading when you can. It's about doing puzzles or, a lot of that stuff can be fun too. So do you see how fun is embedded in every aspect of PERMA V? But you need this is the argument. You need every single one of those things and you need it every day. And that could be overwhelming. And so I would just say start somewhere. So if you know you're really good at positive emotion, which a lot of people are, in other words, I'm going to go see a movie and have all the snacks that I want because it feels good and I'm getting away, go ahead and do that. But if that's what you're doing 3 days, 5 days a week, then it's time to kind of like balance that out. And I dislike the word balance. I prefer either synergizing or harmonizing because balance indicates that it's a one-to-one ratio, but it's really not that way. What we need to do, each and every person is going to find their own balance, if you will. So I look at it as a harmonic device to where you look at all these different aspects and figure out ways to increase whatever is lacking in your life.
Mhm. Yeah, that was a really helpful breakdown of like the different aspects that to just kind of bring some focus to and try to bring into your life that I feel like would benefit like everyone and everywhere kind of thing, just be like if you feel like something's like missing, like you're like, oh, I'm not quite happy, I'm not quite fulfilled, then it's just like, having like this idea of like being able to take some assessment of like your life in like with the idea of like Perma V in mind, I think is very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and
for sharing.
obviously, oh, of course, yeah. It's not the only model that's out there. There are lots of other models. This is one that has worked for me. And so I always advocate for people who might feel like, there's something missing in their life. They're looking for some guidance or understanding to better assess that. Look into PermaV, but go ahead and look into other things as well. Just try to see if you can find things that are evidence-based, backed by research, which is going to get harder as we move forward in these next 4 years. But this has been around for decades, so it is definitely backed by science. And as I mentioned, there are others. But it really reminds me of when I was young and I was studying acting. That was my undergraduate degree. And one of the first things that I learned in class was that as actors, it is our job to learn as many different models, theories, frameworks as we possibly can, and not to just emulate one or this one. It's to pick and choose the things that resonate with all these different things so that we create our own model, our own framework that works best for us, which
Mhm.
will be unique to our circumstances and could change over time, could change moment to moment. But if you don't have those tools at your disposal and you feel lost or you feel like you're not enough, which you're going to feel anyway. I mean, but if you're feeling that way for too long, that's an indication that something's missing. And it's usually because you need more of your values actualized in your life. They're not being honored. Something is off. And you got to figure out what those things are at, at the very least, so you have the knowledge as to how to navigate through the relationships that are going to, and not just the relationships, the people, the places, the things that are going to resonate better with you. They're going to help you to become a better person and to feel more well-being and flourishing in your life, as opposed to sucking you dry and making you just feel like a cog in a wheel, even when you're not at work.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I feel like especially in like these times that we're living in, people feeling like work is like all that they are sometimes, and that there's not really, they're not like important and um valued. And like I think that I mean, I think that we're probably hopefully we're heading into a direction eventually where people kind of will start taking back their lives a little bit more and
Mm.
not just feeling like they are the cog, in society.
Yeah, I hope so too. Sometimes we got to go backwards a bit. I hate to say it that way, but it's the
Mhm.
truth. Sometimes we call it somewhat a regression to the mean, where the mean in this case would be not a great place, where humanity is at its worst or close to it.
Mhm.
And based on history, in my mind, I'm really hoping that history does not repeat itself, but by all indications, it does seem that we're going in that direction, especially here in the United States. And if that is the case, there is an opportunity in my mind that I'm hopeful for, to your point, that people will start to say, this is not who I am. This does not resonate with me and my values. This does not seem like the best route for humanity. And so I must do something about it and be motivated to act in whatever ways they deem necessary and appropriate to make sure that we course correct. And at that point in time, I don't know how far back we have to go, but I think we're about to see, unfortunately, what that will be. Um, and I never thought in my lifetime, and I know there's a lot of other people out there listening to this who feel similarly, that we would ever see something like this. I can't say that progress, and that's a very big umbrella word to use. So I'll just use it very generally speaking. I don't think many people are saying that the progressive movement, if you will, was perfect in any way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
There was a lot of things that just were not working and that needed to be done better. But the analogy that I had one of my colleagues use is that, if something's broken in the kitchen, you don't burn the house down. It's like this all or nothing stance, which is a cognitive distortion. And when it's used purposefully, it's a nefarious distortion, is it not?
Mhm.
That we need to burn everything down. But keep in mind that people on the left were suggesting similar things, that we defund the police, although I want to be careful. Like, I'm an advocate for defunding things that don't work out and that are embedded in racist ideologies and have a history of oppression. So I'm not, again, trying to bring this up, and I know it's a very serious topic, um, to try to disparage people who are embedded in that. But if you think about the realities of defunding completely, although I don't think that was ever the intent, but when it's taken to an extreme, it's like, no, it all needs to go away and we need to build from scratch. Well, that's exactly what's happening on the right, if you think about it.
Mhm.
Now, I'd much rather see some of the things that we're looking at demolition, if you will, happening on the left because I agree with those things. But if you look at what the underlying mechanism there is about just destruction and starting from scratch, that's exactly what's happening and what we're engaged in now.
Mhm.
We, meaning the US government.
Yeah.
Um, and that's a much scarier prospect. So I like to go back because we get very angry, and I'm a gay man, so the LGBTQ umbrella, if you will, has not always been in cahoots with each other. There's been infighting that has existed, as will happen with in groups all the time.
Mhm.
People disagree. They have different sort of values, and maybe those are sub values because we're all together in the same kind of overarching values, which is we want to be respected. We want to be able to live on this earth. We want to be able to flourish as we see. As is important. We don't want to be disparaged, et cetera, et cetera. So what I was finding though is that some people in that umbrella were pointing fingers to the other side, if you will, and saying, "Oh, those breeders, they're nothing but, problems and they're just breeding kids who just are just like them." And so what are we engaging in when we start speaking that way and creating a rhetoric? We're adding to this sort of discourse that's separating us.
Mhm.
And some people will say, well, of course I am, because they're engaged in hateful activities that I could never agree with. And that's absolutely true, not with everyone, but there's enough people feeling that way that they want people like myself to be off this earth. But I know in my heart, based on psychology and just living life, that no one is going to respond to any of us if we are just giving them the same divisiveness and hate that they are giving us. We're not doing any good.
Mhm.
We're not making any difference. And that's hard. It's easier to talk about, but it's much harder when I have somebody in my face who's telling me that my very existence, or that I'm not worthy to exist, and me not reacting to that. It's one thing for us to talk about it here in a safe space and much more difficult to actually practice. But that, I think, is where we need to start practicing. If we can't practice it in more of these safe spaces, like what we have here with our friends, and then engaging with people who think, act, and believe differently than us, then this rift, if you will, is just going to continue. And by all indications, the research is very clear. When it continues, the opportunity for violence and destruction increases. So we don't want that. It's already started. And
Mhm.
so, what are some ways that we can actively try to reach across? I won't say the aisle because we're not necessarily there, but reach across to people who are vehemently different than us.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to like you talked about being from a very religious household, and very much goes back to like Christian values of like compassion and you know, charity and, things like that. And, and I think that it takes a really big person, obviously, to show that to someone who is obviously being hateful towards them, but I ultimately like that is what needs to happen is people need to like see each other as human, be able to see each other as humans and not just like based on their ideology, and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But obviously we have some uh, distance to go. Like,
Right, right.
yeah.
And let's be real, we're working up against a machine of mass media that is giving messaging to individuals who are willing to accept it and who are living in that silo, and those messages are being bounced around every single day. And regardless of how strong someone might think they are, when you live in that silo, that becomes your reality. I always go back to an actor is realistic in the moment because of repetition. They are repeating lines until they know them like the back of their hands so that they can perform something for an audience that is believable. And the way you do that is by making it a reality for yourself, by tapping into the aspects of yourself that you might have never otherwise kind of allowed to come to the fore, such as murder. Playing a murderer. I like to use extremes sometimes to try to make a point here. You could believably get to that place through repetition and finding those aspects of yourself that actually would do those things. And
Mhm.
so any human being is prone to finding themselves in this kind of either alternate reality or space to where they're believing things that from an outsider's perspective could seem totally like crazy. Like, how is this happening? But when you begin to understand that any human being is prone to this, it doesn't change your belief system. It doesn't make you say, oh, well, now they're that's fine. I think I'll join them. Most people won't react that way. But what will happen is you'll start to gain a sense of understanding. You'll start to gain a sense of sympathy and empathy, hopefully.
Mhm.
And that way, when you engage with those people, you could bring some love to the table instead of hate. And that makes all the difference in the world. And this has happened with my family, obviously. So I've had the opportunity, and I'm not saying I do it perfectly. There's always a recalibration that needs to take place. Keeps me on my feet for sure. But those conversations have been very fruitful in terms of me understanding that it's like negotiating with a cat. You're not going to win all the time. And
Yeah.
occasionally you might, but they're going to keep doing what they're doing. And so at some point, fighting them is not really, or yelling and screaming at them is not really going to make a difference. It might make you feel better because you feel justified because you feel your reality. In a lot of cases, our reality is actually much more truthful and grounded and engaged in betterment for society. But standing in that is only good for ourselves a lot of times. It's not good to really help other people when we're attacking them, when we're coming across as with this righteous indignation, which we have every right to feel. But then how do we manage through that so that we can actually make a connection? And we all have to do that because that's how we counter the mass media messages that are happening. Unless we're all going to get together and come up with billions of dollars to counter all of that. That's not happening. So what's our alternative? I think part of it, a big part of it, is us talking to each other.
Mhm. Yeah. And, yeah, being able to have uncomfortable, nuanced conversations with people that don't think the same as you, which is something that a lot of people are not comfortable with, and are not doing.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Um, we're getting kind of close to the end of our hour. I always like to ask my guests, how do you define fun?
Yeah, so what I mentioned is how I define it. So it's really about in my mind, like I used to think of myself as a really fun person. I also used to think of myself as an extrovert. I was the life of the party. That's how I defined fun. I'm so glad that I got beyond that because that kind of fun really would have killed me if I would have, continued to engage. So I would say be okay with how you define fun in this moment, but also look to see how you could redefine it, and get different perspectives. So there might be things in your life that you feel are not fun at all, like cleaning the bathroom. It's mentioned that before. But what are some ways that you can challenge yourself to make it fun? Adding some music, whatever it is. Like, I think that to me is a great way to kind of insert something different in our lives. I think that creativity, if you will, because you're making decisions, can be fun if we allow ourselves to have it. So it's not just going to a party. It's not just about drinking, staying up all night, or laughing all night with your friends, although those could be fun as well. But how do you insert more fun, quote unquote, into your life? Because in this day and age, as we have talked about ad nauseum already, it is necessary for us to maintain our mental health. And so I would just keep looking at the very rote things that we do in life. Brushing our teeth is another example. And how do you insert something in there? Because if you could do it in the little things, you'll make it much easier to insert in the much harder things. You got to start somewhere. And by practicing it, you're getting your brain kind of ready to start looking at everything that you're doing to see where the fun can be inserted. But you got to define, or at least elongate your sense of what fun can mean. And then you'll start to open doorways that you never thought would be opened.
Mhm. Um, it kind of brings me actually to another question that I like to ask people is what your play personality is. According to the Institute of Play, there's eight play personalities, and you can be more than one. There is the creative, the explorer, the kinesthetic,
Mm.
competitor, storyteller, director, collector, and joker.
Okay. Definitely storyteller. Um, Investigator was the second one, I think.
Explorer, yeah.
Explorer, sorry.
No, it's okay. It's kind of same.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, those things resonate with me. I think I love exploring, and that's something we really didn't talk much about. But doing research, my 13 years, the through line has been research and evaluation, and that ties very closely to storytelling. So that's how I build my creativity, if that wasn't obvious already.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Where can the audience find you?
The easiest way to find me is at drjosh.solutions. That's the website. So HTTPS colon //. Do we say that at all? It's so weird.
Not anymore, I feel like, yeah.
And we don't say the www anymore. I got that.
Mhm.
That just goes to show you how old I am. But anyway, Dr. Josh is DRJOSH dot solutions, spelled just like the word with an S at the end. And that's in place of a .com or .org. So sorry if it's a little confusing, but
Okay.
you'll definitely get to me that way. You'll see my email, my social handles, the book that I wrote, which is called I'm Not Dead Yet, How I Turned My Misfortunes into Strengths.
I know we didn't talk about that at all.
Which is fine. I mean, I love the conversation that we had today. I thought it was so interesting, and I'm so thankful for the opportunity. So thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I really enjoyed our conversation too. It was just, you know, I definitely wanted it to just flow. So I didn't end up talking about your book, but um Oh, just before I leave, did you I saw that you released a audiobook of it, and as an actor, I assume you read it, right?
No, I wish.
No.
Yeah, you know what I found out? Not to spend too much time on this, because I don't know if how much of your listeners would be interested, but ever since 2020, I learned a lot of voiceover actors started to build their own in-house studios with the best equipment that you could purchase. And I never did that. So my acting style has usually been like on the stage, and so during 2020, I just stopped doing everything. Like what I do now, I have my 9 to 5, and then at nighttime, I will occasionally do a show. I'll go to an audition or something. But the point being is that when I started to shop around for what it would cost, because you're right, a lot of people said, "Hey, why don't you just, read your own book?" And I thought, well, why not? Because it's my life. But
Mhm.
when I priced it out, it was super expensive for me to be using a studio. You have to hire so many different types of professionals, audio engineers, a director. I mean, there's a ton of things. And this is my first foray, if I could say the word, into creating books. So I had a lot to learn about, what an audiobook, a professional audiobook would sound like. All that to say that I found a wonderful actor in the UK who I was able to pay at a much uh, less price, although he wasn't cheap and well worth that money because it's also a lot of time commitment. So all that to say, sorry, no, I wish it was my voice on there, but maybe the next book I'll be able to
Yeah.
make that happen.
I mean, I didn't know that was yeah, like that was such cost prohibitive, to do that. Yeah. I just made an assumption, but I'm glad I asked because I'm like, oh, okay. Learn something
Well,
new.
like I said, I mean, hopefully it's not too much information for your listeners, but I mean, who knows? But yeah, it was still a lot of fun to listen to the audio tracks from somebody else's perspective and hear how they were quote unquote acting it, and then providing some notes and going a little bit back and forth. But Andrew Sykes, who's the actor who did the voiceover for the book, the audiobook, did a fantastic job, and I do recommend that folks listen to it. In fact, I'll even venture to say that the audiobook is better than the actual book. And that's my opinion. So, yeah.
Definitely will check it out.
Oh,
Well, thank
great.
you so much for being on, Josh. I really enjoyed our
Oh,
conversation.
it's been such a pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much for everything that you do and for putting this podcast together.
Well, thank you. You have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.